My patrons ask questions and I answer them. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master. Happy Halloween. And today is my Patreon Ask Me Anything. So starting off with this, we got Rhino. What are you dressing up as for Halloween? Well, I am a Nikachu playing now Peak in Modern Merfolk, so that makes me a Pikachu. Right? And that's a great segue into our next question by Michibiki. I would like to know why you did not use any Harbinger of the Tides. Do you think 4 miscallers are too much? And lastly, why do you choose Peak over Spell Pierce? So I'm gonna answer these in reverse order. The first one, Peak over Spell Pierce, like I'm still playing both in the deck. You can play both of them in the main deck, but I have found a lot of value in the card of Peak. And a lot of, I don't know if I've drilled exactly how high impact this card has on our archetype, but it can do a lot of things. So I wanted to play Peak because I was looking for something to do on turns 1 and 2. Merfolk used to be able to play like Dismember and Remand, and Spreading Seas was like a really good play on turn 2. But now Dismember is a lot of damage, or there's just too many archetypes where it just misses, like KCI or Dredge. And even if you're up against spirits or humans, it's a lot of damage against another aggro deck, so you don't want to be putting yourself in a situation, putting your life total so low so early in the game, or even later in the game. Then we get to Remand, which is completely obsolete. We need to be answering cards like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and never see it again. Same thing with cards like Anger of the Gods. That's why we use hard counters like Deprive. So Remand is obsolete. And Spreading Seas just doesn't do what it used to be. There's just too many decks that are ignoring it, like Hardened Scales Affinity or KCI or Spirits or Humans. They can use the blue mana or it doesn't matter. So there are more and more archetypes where playing a turn 2 Spreading Seas is just not really that effective. It doesn't slow the opponent down. So I was looking for something we can do on turn 1 and 2 that is of significance to the Merfolk deck. Now, being able to see your opponent's hand, people are underrating significantly. It's really, really good. If we can see, for example, what kind of lands they have in their hand, we'll know exactly what land to hit with our Spreading Seas. Maybe their only red mana source is in their hand, not on the board. So when we get to our turn 2, we know not to play our Spreading Seas until we hit the red source. Or maybe we see they don't have any lands in their hand, and instead of playing a creature, we'll play the Spreading Seas. So when we see them flooded with lands in their hand, we don't play Spreading Seas on turn 2, we don't waste our time, we'll play much better plays like playing our Merfolk first instead of the Spreading Seas, and then when we see their hand is very light on land, we'll be much more aggressive with Spreading Seas. And the same thing can be said of removal. Like a really good turn 4 play is to play Master of Waves, but what if our opponent has Fatal Push? What if our opponent has Path to Exile? How do you play around that? Well, you just play other cards. You try to encourage your opponent to play the Path to Exile, to play the Fatal Push. Usually the Master Waves play is better, but it's not going to be better if your opponent has a 1 mana answer in their hand. So it's actually better to play out your other cards to encourage them to use their removal, and then you're going to play the Master of Waves and then take over the game and probably win. Peak has this Peak is great against combo, control, and attrition-based decks. Knowing the exact removal suite in their hand lets you play much better. For example, if I know my opponent has Liliana the Last Hope in their hand, I'm not going to start my turn 2 off with Silvergill Adept. It's just going to get eaten by the Liliana the Last Hope. I'm going to start off with Lords and back it up with more Lords. So that's one way you can play around the holdings of your opponent. Same thing could be with Kolaghan's Command if you see Kolaghan's Command in their hand. Same thing against control. If you see sweepers, you can empty your hand if you've got a counter spell that can interact with that sweeper, or you can be reserved and hold back your creatures, chipping away at them because you know that they've got the sweeper in their hand. Then there is the fact that it does draw a card. I'm not trying to play Peak to draw a card, but it is a great bonus. The fact that I can do this at instant speed and draw a card, it's great because Merfolk cannot reliably get blue mana on turn 2. The mana base just doesn't support it. If you're playing 15 or 16 blue sources, you're just not going to have it. There's going to be a really large chunk of games where you have one land Ether Vial hands, and you've got these Mutavault Island hands that can cast Silvergill Adept and Spreading Seas and Phantasmal Image, but you can't actually cast things like Lord of Atlantis, Merfolk Trickster, Master of the Pearl Trident. And by drawing one extra card, by going one card deeper, you're increasing the odds significantly of getting that next land drop. So that's what I really like about this card. And a lot of people try to compare, well, why don't we just play Opt or Serum Visions? But I'm not into just drawing the card. The most important, valuable aspect of Peak is being able to see the opponent's hand and play perfectly around it. I would say 30% of the time the opponent cannot interact with us. The hardest part about playing Modern Merfolk is playing around all the combination of removal spells or answers our opponents have, but 30% of the time they can't do anything. We're just going to play Spreading Seas and then attack with all our creatures, and we don't have to be afraid of any sort of Snapcaster Mage blowouts or any sort of removal spell blowouts. There's a decent chunk of the time they don't have any removal in their hand, they can't interact with our board, and we can just freely attack into them, making our attacks so much more powerful and closing the game out so much quickly. And maybe to really put into perspective, let's talk a little bit about game theory optimal plays. Let's start off with like rock, paper, scissors. Let's say you are in a rock, paper, scissors tournament and you know that 50% of the metagame chooses rock, 30% chooses scissors, and 20% chooses paper. The game theory optimal strategy in that tournament is to always choose paper no matter who you're up against. You don't know what they're going to choose, rock, paper, or scissors, but you know 50% choose rock, so always choose paper, and you're going to win 50% of the time, you're going to draw 20% of the time, and you're going to lose 30% of the time. But what if we knew what they were going to do well in advance? What if we could peek and know exactly if they were choosing rock, scissors, or paper? Then we would win 100% of the time, right? So that is the value of that information. So let's apply that to an actual game. Against a lot of control decks, we are reserved with our creatures. We're playing patiently because we don't want to walk into a supreme verdict. But in the game, so that helps us a lot in the games where they do have Supreme Verdict, but we're going to lose some percentage points in the games where they don't have Supreme Verdict because we are giving them more draw steps in order to draw a Supreme Verdict or draw an answer or catch up in the game in some way. So in the games where they have Supreme Verdict, we're playing perfectly. In the games where they don't have Supreme Verdict, we're not playing perfectly. We're playing suboptimal. We're losing games where we should win. And that's where Peak comes in. When we play Peak, we're going to win all the games. We're going to play perfectly every single time they have Verdict. And we're never letting them catch up in any games where they don't have Supreme Verdict. Same thing can be with a lot of combo decks. We're going to play perfectly and patiently when they've got the combo set up. We're going to kill them as quickly as possible when they don't have their combo set up. We're not going to give them extra draw steps. So that's how Peak increases our win rate a lot in a very large chunk of matchups. I mean, even against Tron, you play Peak against Tron, you can know exactly which Urza land is vulnerable and attack it. So a pretty common question people ask me, like, Nikachu, well, why don't we play Vendilion Click? It's like the same thing, right? But the problem is it can't be played on turn 1 or 2. I'm not looking for effects that are for turns 3, 4, or 5. We have tons of things to do on those turns. I want something that I can play on turn 1 or 2, which I feel the Merfolk deck is deprived of. And so yeah, I think Peak is great, and that's why I'm always going to have it in the main deck. So I don't think I really need Spell Pierce in the main. You can, but I would push something else out. For me, Peak is going to be a mainstay of the Merfolk deck for quite a while in the future. I'm going to be playing with at least 2, sometimes up to 4. Yeah, I love the card, and I hope that my explanation for it is adequate. Like the high level explanation is that Merfolk can play much more exploitably and not hedged their bets with game theory optimal strategy. We can now go for the kill when the kill is in sight, and then play cautiously when we know we have to, and also play perfectly around exactly what they have. So yeah, that answers that question. Are four missed colors too much? In some way you could say yes, in some ways no. I don't think so, because I think the three largest decks in the metagame right now are humans, spirits, and dredge. And so if you plan on winning any sort of large tournament, you need to have a good edge against all those decks. That's why I'm playing with 4 Mistcaller. Mistcaller great against dredge because, you know, interacts with the prized amalgams, which are the main beat stick in order to beat us. So if we can exile those, we're in great shape. Against spirits, it's an early beater, so it is very important in these aggro matchups that we have some pressure early on, and that we can force in some damage to a point where, you know, if our opponent's life total is low enough, then they can't recklessly attack us, because if their life total is high enough, then they can go swing at us, put us in under a lot of pressure, knowing that we can't swing back for the win. So we don't want to let them do that. So we need to be able to apply a steady amount of pressure. It's going to start turn 1 with any vanilla creature. And Mistcaller can interact, however, with Collected Company, which is the main way they keep the gas coming. They don't actually have a lot of threats in their deck. They've got a lot of mana dorks. They're playing with Aether Vial. They're playing with like 22 lands. Spirits has a lot of air. So the way they can seal the deal is with Collected Company. Mistcaller is a great answer to that. And so a similar situation with humans. Mistcaller not great in its ability, because like the only thing it can interact with is Aether Vial, which is okay, but not brilliant. But the most important thing is it is an early game creature that can help apply damage. If you're not doing anything on turn 1 against spirits or humans, you're in a lot of trouble. You're probably going to lose a lot. You're going to be disadvantaged in those game 1s, and then you're going to try to have to catch up post board, which, you know, not very easy. They also bring in hate for us post board. So I don't think 4 Mistcallers are too much right now. My opinion could change if humans or spirits start to disappear in favor of the attrition-based decks like Jund or Rock decks. But we'll have to wait and see if that's what's going to happen. Right now, still in the big open tournaments, humans and spirits are super popular. They're making day 2 in large numbers, so I want to be prepared for that with a bunch of 1 mana, 1/1 Merfolk creatures that I can play on turn 1. And lastly, I would like to know why you did not use any Harbinger of the Tides, because Harbinger of the Tides is like really awkward right now. It's like a 4 mana Merfolk Trickster, as far as I'm concerned. Very clunky, so like not really, it's just a worse version of Merfolk Trickster, especially against control decks or combo decks, where I want to hold up my mana and then play creatures at flash speed. There's like if you look at the top decks like humans and spirits, it's really awkward. Humans plays Aether Vial, so if you bounce something, they can just replay it immediately. And another problem is that like there's so many enter the battlefield triggers. Do you want to bounce that Reflector Mage? Do you want to bounce the Champion of the Parish to help trigger Thalia's Lieutenant? Do you want to bounce Thalia's Lieutenant and redistribute like counters over all their creatures? And you can't even bounce the most important creature, which is Mantis Rider. So Harbinger of the Tides, not really that good against humans. Like, it's just not as effective as it would be against other decks. And I could say a similar thing with spirits. They've got flash creatures like Rattle Chains and what's it called? Spell Queller, and they've got Aether Vial, so if we bounce something, they can replay it. And they also have Drogskull Captain, which says all other spirits get +1/+1 and hexproof. So the creatures that are given hexproof can't even be bounced. And if you want to bounce the Drogskull Captain, well, that's the thing that's untapped because it just entered play. So I'm finding Harbinger of the Tides a little bit awkward. Still a player. Like, Grixis Death Shadow is still out there. 5-color Death Shadow is still out there. Dredge is coming. I mean, Dredge is back, and I do think Harbinger of the Tides is pretty decent against Dredge because bouncing those prize melons give you enough time to try to turn the corner. But I just find the card a little too awkward. I just find that Merfolk Trickster has replaced Harbinger of the Tides, and if I want to bring Harbinger back to the deck, I'm going to need to make some concessions somewhere else, a concession I'm not willing to make. So anyway, thank you very much, all of you, for your questions as usual. I hope that was enlightening. I hope this is a great answer to everyone who's curious about Peak. Why am I playing Peak in Modern Merfolk? This will be a great video to direct people to. So anyway, this has been Nikachu giving his Patreon Ask Me Anything. Have a happy Halloween.